So Rose has been a prominent figure for 20 years, which means from the time she was about 12, and a syndicated conservative talk show host. She's a frequent guest for Sean Hannity and makes regular appearances on Fox News. Currently, and this is super cool if you haven't seen it yet, she is the spokesman for the Made in America trade show, celebrating the essence of who we are. She also serves on the advisory board for Women for Trump Coalition and Moms for America, and she's worked with the Smaller Manufacturers Council as a political liaison. And I have to tell you, you meet people throughout life, and sometimes you are almost blinded by the life force and the power behind someone, and you've met someone special. I felt that way when I first met Andrew Breitbart, and I felt that way when I first met Rose. And my life has been enriched by who she is, and you don't know how lucky you are for the next half an hour to get to hear what she has to say. So.
Thanks, guys. So I wanted to talk a little bit to the ladies in the room, but the men are allowed to listen in, because by now you should be used to us talking and you listening. Am I right about that? There you go. We're going to help you do that right now. Speaking of women, there was a recent survey done, and it found that women who put on a few extra pounds actually live longer than the guys who mention it. That makes sense, right? I was thinking the other day that my husband should just go ahead and forget about all his mistakes, because it's not useful for two people to remember them all, right? I got them all. You don't have to worry about it anymore. The recent polls are suggesting that Donald Trump is losing the support of women. He doesn't even have, they are suggesting, the support that he had in 2016. He no longer has that going into the 2020 race. Does anyone here, especially you women, believe that any of that is true? No. After the 2016 election, we were vote shamed as women. And I'm going to talk to you men in a minute too, but really you should care about this as well, because this is significant. After the 2016 election, we were vote shamed. Articles were written about us, the betrayal of the white female voter, or it was suggested that we were foot soldiers to the patriarchy because we supported Donald Trump. Foot soldiers to the patriarchy. And what they were doing to us, the media and the left, was actually trying to put us back under the thumb of the very patriarchy that we had fought so hard to get out from under, right? They were suggesting that we couldn't make up our own minds when it came to who we wanted to represent us. Hillary Clinton said that we did what our husbands, our brothers, our boyfriends, our sons, our fathers, the next door neighbor that was a guy, and our bosses told us to do. Does anybody even remotely believe that? Okay, I don't know any woman that is going to ask anyone else for they might get input, but no one is going, that I know, no woman I know, is going to allow a man to influence the way they vote. And we know there's a lot at stake. So they wanted us to feel badly about how we voted in 2016. But I am here to say, is there anything really that we should be ashamed of? First of all, as women, we like a guy that keeps his promises, and Donald Trump has done that. He promised to get us out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. He did it right away, in fact. He got us out of the horrible Iran deal. He said he'd do it, and he did it. And he said au revoir to the Paris Climate Accord. Thank God. So he kept his promises. Not only that, but Donald Trump has the most female senior advisors in his administration than the last 3 administrations. Female unemployment is at a 50-year low. And as women, we care about all the other unemployment numbers as well. Youth unemployment is also at a 50-year low. African Americans and Hispanics are experiencing the lowest unemployment, historically, the lowest unemployment. We like that as women. We believed that that would happen when he laid out his pro-growth economic plan for us. So we have nothing at all as women to be ashamed of, do we? We have Supreme Court nominees that are so ultra-conservative too. We got 2 of them. He kept his promise there. I remember reading Never Trumpers writing about how we're never going to have a conservative Supreme Court again. Do you remember that, Christina? A lie. We got it. We might even get more. We need 4 more years. So we know that when it comes to the media and the media understanding the voters, the supporters of Donald Trump, they're never going to get it right, are they? Never. So now when we look at all of the success that we have seen through this administration, I think we can feel pretty good about it. And especially right now when we consider that next August, ladies, will be 100-year anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. And I want to talk about that for a minute because it's significant. The 19th Amendment, the suffrage movement came out of the Second Great Awakening. So many times when we have a spiritual revival in our country, we see amazing things happen. After the First Great Awakening came our Revolutionary War and the fight for freedom. The Second Great Awakening gave us in this country a movement toward freeing slaves. And a lot of the women that began to work on that, who were influenced by the Second Great Awakening, were working on freeing slaves, and then they started talking, and they thought, you know what? We do believe that all men are created equal, but we also believe that women are created equal. So as they were working on this movement to free slaves, they decided, wait a minute, we need a voice as well. We deserve a voice. We should have a say in public policy. We should have a say in how this country is run because we are the mothers of this great country. We are the mothers of the sons and daughters in this country. So that started the whole movement towards the 19th Amendment. Now, what I find really interesting is that those women, and I think of 2 automatically, Susan B. Anthony, of course, and also Elizabeth Cady Stanton. These women started working on this. They worked together for 51 years, and they still never saw the end of that battle. It was another 18 years after that before we had the right to vote. And I say all this not because I'm on a feminist movement right now. I say this because it is so important to us, just as important as it was 243 years ago when those men in 1776 met, the Continental Congress, and they were deciding on the most radical event of all times. 13 colonies were going to become the new United States of America. It was radical. What they had to do to get there and what would happen after that, it scared them because they knew that this was risky business. Freedom did not come easily. But they got together 243 years ago. They were deliberating. And it was interesting because history tells us that those men all agreed in that room that we needed to declare our independence. They knew that freedom was what was required for a prosperous nation. But they couldn't agree on the timing. But would you? Would you be anxious to run towards that when you knew that you were putting your fortune at risk, you were putting your lives at risk? So they're deliberating, they're dragging their feet, and finally John Witherspoon stands up and he said, you know what? There is a tide in the affairs of men. Do you perceive it now before you? To hesitate is to commit to our own slavery. And that did it. And I thought, you know what, he's right. We can't hesitate because we lived under tyranny. So they signed it, and you know, there are some historians that record that those men, those brave men, those strong men, those very smart men, because after all, they gave us that independence. They knew what they were doing. They wept. Some of them wept. Others fell to their knees and prayed because they knew that they were once slaves to a tyrannical government and we're now free. And sometimes I think if they could look at us right now, they would weep once again because we were free and we are falling into the slavery of a tyrannical government once again if we're not careful. You know, these Democrats are all talking about socialism, and then they think if they say to you, not that kind of socialism, we're talking about democratic socialism. Let me tell you something. There is no such thing as democratic socialism. Under democratic socialism, the very first election that you have will be the very last free election that you will ever have. It is such a lie, and it's a myth, and it's just a continuation of that effort to bring us on, once again, under the thumb of the very ruling class that we fought to get out from under. And here's the thing that I think of when I think about those founding fathers. They knew that they were never going to fully appreciate living in a free country. They knew they would never experience and taste the fruit of their labor. So when they did what they did and the sacrifices that they made, they did so for a generation of people that they were never going to know. They did it for you. They did it for me. They did it for all of us in this room and for those that come after us. They knew they were doing something magnificent, and yet they knew they weren't going to appreciate it and enjoy it themselves. And when I think sometimes, when we think about an inheritance for our children, because I'm at an age where it's like, oh my gosh, I've got to get that will done. I've got to think about what I want to leave behind for my son. You got to consider this and ask yourself, what is it that holds the most value when you think about an inheritance for your children? Is it the car, that sports car in the garage? Is it the stocks, the jewelry, your home? Or is it liberty? Is it liberty that we should consider as an inheritance for our children? And if we believe that, then we've got to fight once again in 2020 to ensure that liberty for a generation of children that we will never know. I believe this is our time to make that commitment to fighting that battle for freedom and for liberty. And then when I think about women again, and I think about 11 years after that momentous moment, 1776, when 50 delegates were meeting in Philadelphia because they were drafting the Constitution. They were drafting a document for that republic. And they had been meeting for 3 months in Philadelphia. Now think about this. If you have all these guys, this is like new, right? It's novel. These are the leaders of our country. This is a brand new country, 11 years old since we declared our independence, and they're meeting in our town. Imagine the people walking through the square in front of Constitution Hall. I can't imagine what that would be like, because you know what? They were afraid. They were worried. They want to hold on to this newfound freedom, this new world that they've created, that they have just tasted. And they're walking through the town square. They're waiting. It's 3 months. They're really concerned. Finally, on the final day of deliberation, Benjamin Franklin walks out those doors. Who's the first person to greet him, history tells us? It was a woman. History says that a woman approached him and said, "Tell me, doctor, what have we got? A monarchy or a republic?" And of course, his famous response was, "A republic, if you can keep it." Yeah. Why was it a woman? I think about that sometimes. The mother of her children. The mother who is concerned about the future of her children. Not that you dads aren't, we know you are, but we worry way more than you do. Because I don't know about you ladies, but when my husband and I go to bed, he's like out, just like that, the minute his head hits the pillow. Me, I'm thinking, okay, what's for lunch tomorrow? He has a test, did he study for it? We are always thinking about those children. And she was worried. She had to know. She probably nabbed him the minute he walked out that door and asked him that question. Please, God, don't let it be a monarchy. Please, God, let it be a free republic. It is up to us to keep it. He gave her that admonition. We must keep it. When I say that we were shamed after the last election. I've been talking to women as a member of the Women's Coalition for Trump. And I am hearing from women all over the country. We're speaking all over the country. And they feel emboldened. They're empowered. And I think that we're going to have a louder voice coming up on 2020. I don't believe the media when they tell us that he is losing the support of women. I just don't believe that at all. When I think about Susan B. Anthony, and I think about Elizabeth Cady Stanton, two women of great faith, two women who cared about you women in the audience today, or men, your daughters, or your nieces, or your sisters, giving us that opportunity. And when they had been fighting that battle for the vote after 51 years, Susan wrote to Elizabeth, and she said this: "Little did we dream that a half a century later, we would be turning the battle over to another generation of women." They fought for 51 years for that. They had to turn it over to another generation of women. But you know what? I know that all of us in this room refuse to turn over the battle for freedom and the preservation of our Constitution to another generation. Am I right? This is our battle, and we have got to fight it. We owe it to our children, and we owe it to those that we will never see. And it's interesting because you brought up the manufacturers. Having an opportunity to work with people who are committed to American-made products, that's something else that this president has done for this country. What he's done is he said that the words made in America means something again. And they do. And that when you consider made in America, I talk to a lot of manufacturers, and they tell me that they worry about buying sourcing the materials they need for their products from overseas. They don't trust what's going to be in those materials. And people like Kimberly, you and I have a friend, Barbara Creighton. At 50 years old, this woman, because she could in America establish her own business, she was going through menopause, and she thought, and this is 20 years ago when a natural remedy for that wasn't readily available and people weren't really talking about it. She decided she was going to produce a product for women that was all natural. And she told me that she couldn't possibly conceive of getting anything or sourcing anything that she needed for that, for women, because she cared about what they were going through, from anywhere else but from the States, from right here. And when the media, we talked earlier at the panel, we talked about fake news. The media would have you believe that somehow the businesses had been caught off guard when we talk about the trade wars and talk about China. But when I talked to these business owners, they told me that they knew this was coming. He told us this before he was elected, that this was coming down the road. And so knowing that, they went into it prepared. They saw what was on the horizon. They believed him when he said he was going to do it. And they prepared themselves, and they started sourcing more and more here in the States. And guess what? New businesses started popping up. Other businesses already established grew, all as a result of Made in America. So we are telling not only consumers here in this country, but the world, that the words Made in America means something again. We have, since he's been in office, 523,000 new jobs, 500,000 manufacturing jobs. That's manufacturing jobs alone, over 500,000. 6 million new jobs have been created. Half of those, 3 million, went to women. When we commit to American made, we are saying that the most patriot thing we can say. We are buying American, we are supporting American, because that means other Americans are still working. We are keeping Americans working, and we are keeping this country moving. So, ladies, I don't know about you, and guys, I know you don't feel ashamed, and nobody even tried to do that to you, but they did try to shame us, and it didn't work. It didn't work. So when we go forward, we need to consider that we are thinking about the inheritance that we're leaving for our children, preserving the Constitution and those liberties that allowed us everything that we have experienced in our life as we go forward for a generation of people that we may never know. And I think that I'm out of time. So thank you for coming in here today. I appreciate it.